He slid his plate across the worn-out wooden table, whispering softly, "You need this more than I do." The old couple froze, their thin fingers hovering over the food as if it were too precious to touch. Tears welled in their tired eyes. No one had ever given them something so selfless, not in all the years they had lived. What the boy did not know in that moment was that this small sacrifice would soon bring a millionaire to his door. Daniel's stomach ached, growling like a drum in an empty hall. The steam from the food curled into his nose, stirring hunger that almost made his hands tremble. He had worked all day, selling newspapers just to afford this plate. But when he saw the frail couple sitting in the corner of the alley, their hands clutched together for warmth, their eyes hollow from days without food, something inside him stirred. He remembered his mother's words, "Even when you have nothing, give." And so it did. Daniel was only 12 years old, yet his life had already been a river of loss. His father had died years earlier in a factory accident. His mother, the only warmth in his world, had been taken by illness when they could not afford medicine. Alone, Daniel survived by selling papers on the street. He called out the headlines with his small voice to rushing crowds who rarely noticed him. He earned just enough for a little food, sometimes a candle, sometimes nothing. Still, even in his hunger, he never let go of kindness. That night, after giving away his only meal, he returned to his small room with walls that held more cracks than paint. Cold air leaked through every opening, biting his skin. He lay on the floor with an empty belly but a full heart, whispering into the silence, "Mama, I hope I did right." Then he closed his eyes, surrendering to sleep. What Daniel did not know was that someone had noticed his sacrifice. The old couple he had fed were not only beggars, they were once teachers, forgotten by the world in their old age, and more than that, his quiet act had been seen. The next morning, a knock startled him awake. He thought it must be the landlord again, angry about unpaid rent. His chest tightened with fear. But when he opened the door, what he saw left him frozen. A tall man in a dark suit stood before him, his shoes shining as though they carried their own light. Behind him was a car Daniel had only seen in magazines, black, long, polished like glass. The man's voice was steady, but kind. "Are you Daniel?" The boy nodded, his hands gripping the wooden frame of the door. "I was told what you did last night," the man continued. "How you gave your food away." Daniel's brows pulled together. "I don't understand." The man leaned closer. "My name is Mr. Ellis. You don't know me, but I know something about you. You gave when you had nothing. That is strength." Daniel stood speechless, unsure if this was a dream. Mr. Ellis was not just a man in a suit. He was one of the wealthiest men in the city, a self-made millionaire who had once known hunger himself. Years ago, he too had been poor and forgotten. A stranger's kindness had saved him, and he had never forgotten it. When he heard about Daniel, he saw himself. That morning, Mr. Ellis took Daniel to breakfast. The boy stared at the plate stacked with eggs, bread, fruit, and warm milk. His small voice quivered as he asked, "Is all this for me?" "Daniel," Mr. Ellis replied, "no one with a heart like yours should go hungry." For the first time in months, Daniel's stomach was full, but more than the food, it was the feeling of being seen, of being valued, that filled him most. In the days that followed, Mr. Ellis ensured Daniel's life would change. He placed him in school, bought him books and clothes, and gave him a safe place to stay. The boy who had given away his only plate of food now sat in a classroom, pencilin and eyes lit with dreams. But Daniel never forgot the lesson of that night, and Mr. Ellis never forgot to share it. When people asked why he had chosen to help, he would say, "True wealth is not in what you keep, but in what you give away when you have the least." The story of Daniel began to spread. The old couple told neighbors about the boy who gave up his meal so they could live another day. Soon, people spoke his name with respect instead of pity, and slowly, others began to notice the hungry children on the streets, to give instead of turn away. Life was not suddenly perfect. There were still struggles, still moments of pain, but Daniel's shoulders grew straighter, his eyes brighter, his hope alive again. He carried with him words that became his own. Hunger can break your body, but selfishness breaks your soul. Chose tohiba. Even when it hurts, because one day, that seed of kindness will grow into something greater than you can imagine. Years later, when Daniel stood before others as a man, those words would echo in hearts just as his mother's had echoed in his. Kindness is never wasted. It always finds its way back. So, remember Daniel, remember the boy who had nothing, yet gave everything. And when you see someone in need, do not look away. Because one act of sacrifice, one spark of compassion, can change a life, and sometimes even the world. If this story touched you, think for a moment, what kindness can you give today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Telu use ivyuve. Ever been lifted by a small act of generosity? And if you believe in stories that remind us of silent strength and unseen battles, make sure to subscribe. Because the smallest sacrifices often carry the greatest power.